Hello and welcome into the endocrinology lectures. In this lecture, I will talk briefly about the thyroid gland. This lecture is presented by Dr. ZUHAIR. In this lecture, we have objective, we have to reach it. The objective of this lecture to recall the basic biochemistry of thyroid hormones, describe the basic feedback mechanism between the thyroid and pituitary, to enumerate the metabolic function of thyroid gland. Firstly, what is the thyroid gland? Central and essential to the endocrine system is the thyroid gland. The thyroid produces and releases hormones that regulate the metabolism of dietary sources of fats, carbohydrates, and help to regulate energy level, body temperature, and to lesser degree play a role in fertility and bone health. As will be discussed in greater detail, the thyroid gland is under the direct control of the pituitary gland and hypothalamus, and provide feedback to these endocrine control centers as to need for production of thyroid hormone. By mean that the control of thyroid gland is also done by hypothalamus pituitary axis, and the pituitary release hormone that to control the thyroid gland and thyroid hormone to release in circulation. Here overview of the anatomy of the thyroid gland. Anatomy: human have a single thyroid gland which is rich in hormone producing endocrine tissues. The pituitary function of the thyroid is to regulate, or the primary function of the thyroid is to regulate the metabolic rate of the body. The thyroid is both a production center and a receiver for hormone it produces. Here we have a picture under the slide show us the position or the anatomy of the thyroid gland, which contain two lobes like the butterfly shape, and connect the two lobes by connective tissues, is also known as the isthmus, connect between the left and right lobe. So it's a thyroid gland here is in front of trachea and have two lobe, left thyroid gland and right thyroid gland. Location: the thyroid gland, or locating the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is fairly easy to locate by gently palpitation of the neck on either side of voice box or larynx. Physicians will often palpate the thyroid during medical visits to check for evidence of inflammation, nodules, or tumors. Each of these findings will be discussed in greater detail. Here in this lecture show us the position of the thyroid gland in front of the neck, and this position allow the physician to make a decision or to make a diagnostic by hand palpate, so as during a medical visit or to the medical visit to the center. So it's also give or to help to check the evidence of inflammation or nodules or tumors when it is increased in size. So this can also help the physician as primary diagnostic by naked eye. So in the next slide, the thyroid anatomy and histology, thyroid gland location. Here in this picture we have the thyroid gland like the better shape, which also rich of thyroid cartilage, and internal jugular vein here by blue color, right uncommon carotid artery. There is isthmus of the thyroid, which is also a connective tissue, connect between the left and right thyroid lobules. And here we have external carotid artery to the left lobe of the thyroid, and behind the thyroid gland we have the trachea. So, structure of thyroid gland. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland which contains two main lobes that are connected by a thin layer of connective tissue which is called the isthmus. The gland is somewhat asymmetrical and is highly vascular, that means rich in blood vessels, to facilitate the delivery of produced hormones to the target tissue throughout the body. Here we have the practice question, so as to refresh the previous mentioned in the last slide. In this practice question, the question is, which statement is true regarding the thyroid gland or thyroid? So please select the single best answer. Here we have from A to D answers. You have to select only one correct answer. So state A, humans have several small thyroid glands located adjacent the key metabolic areas of the body, such as the liver and intestine. Is this sentence is right or wrong? Humans have a single thyroid gland located at the base of the brain, which regulate behaviors and emotion. C, humans have a single thyroid gland with two main lobes located in the neck surround the trachea, which regulate many aspects of metabolism. D, thyroid gland is not under the control of the pituitary gland and operated independent of all other endocrine and hormone influence. So what is the best answer from these four answered sentences? Yeah, okay, I will give you the feedback of the correct answer. The correct answer is number C. That means humans have a single thyroid gland with two main lobes located in the neck surrounding the trachea, which regulate many aspects of metabolism. This is the correct answer. Here in feedback, humans have a single thyroid, as I mentioned, and surrounding the trachea, the thyroid gland control metabolism and metabolic function or metabolic rate under the control of pituitary and hypothalamus gland. So we go on into the histological features of thyroid gland. So histological, the thyroid gland is organized as epithelial cell surrounding colloid containing balls called follicles. The colloid is rich in thyroglobulin, a protein processing many tyrosine residues to which iodine molecule attach to form the thyroid hormone. Here in the right picture, slide of the section of thyroid gland, which is stemmed by iodine and hematoxylin, is stem. In this slide, or histological slide features show us the colloidal, which contain the balls of follicles, and this colloidal is rich of the thyroglobulin, which is a protein that contain high amount of tyrosine, of amino acid tyrosine, and this thyroglobulin have a tyrosine which the iodine molecules can be attached to tyrosine and to release as a T4 or T3 hormone. So here is an overview of thyroid function. Despite weighing only about 25 to 30 grams, this is the weight of thyroid gland, approximately 1 ounce. The thyroid gland controls many aspects of metabolism. Despite this very low weight and very low weight, which have a major function in the body, so as in respect of metabolic function, which include to regulate and control fat, carbohydrates metabolism, body temperature, heat rate, protein production. So metabolism and metabolic rate of the thyroid gland. Thyroid hormone control the metabolic rate and have a direct effect on a number of metabolic processes. With this type of metabolic process controlled by thyroid gland, such as weight management, food metabolism, energy expenditure. So in weight management, the thyroid have a major function in to decrease caloric intake. Thyroid hormone slows the body metabolism, which initially reduces the associated weight reduction. This is believed to be an inversionary role of surviving in a time of starvation. Food metabolism and thyroid hormone. Following consumption of a meal rich in fat and carbohydrates, thyroid hormone is released to increase the metabolic rate. Inadequate release of thyroid hormone may lead to weight gain. So the metabolism related to thyroid hormone as energy expenditure. The thyroid hormone stimulates oxygen consumption in metabolically active tissues. This aerobic metabolism provides essential energy to muscle tissue. So, non-metabolic roles of the thyroid gland as a function. There is a special cell or cells within the thyroid, which is called C cell or parafollicle cell. This, the C cell or parafollicle cells produce a hormone called calcitonin. Calcitonin helps to regulate the metabolism of calcium and to maintain the integrity and density of bones, which also related to calcium concentration. So that means that thyroid hormone have released a special type of hormone beside T4 and T3 have specialized C cell or parafollicular cells. This type of cell control the metabolism of calcium by releasing a hormone called calcitonin, and this hormone also regulates the calcium and the integrity of the bones. Thyroid is also responsible for regulating sleep. Excess production of thyroid hormone causes restlessness and insomnia. So insomnia, that means difficult to sleep. So in this picture show us the thyroid hormone here, like the butterfly, have in the left lobe have two parafollicle cell, which is called C cell. Here is one, and here, and in the right lobe we have two, here one and here. So the total parafollicle cells in the thyroid gland is 4, 2 in the left and 2 in the right lobe. The total of this is 4 parafollicle cells, and this parafollicle cell is also called C cell, which produce a calcitonin. Here is the calcitonin, is the hormone producing by the parafollicle cell of the thyroid hormone, have a major role function so as to regulating calcium. In intestinal have a function to lowering calcium level in a blood, so in circulation have to lowering calcium level. So the main function of the calcitonin to lowering plasma calcium. This is also done by inhibiting calcium reabsorption in the kidney and excreted in the urine. So in bones, promotes deposition of calcium into bones, so that means inhibits osteoclast and stimulate osteoblast. In GIT, it also inhibits calcium absorption by intestinal. So all these regulatory function have to lowering plasma calcium. So in the next slide, pregnancy and fertility. What is the relation between pregnancy and fertility and thyroid gland? Here, insufficient production of thyroid hormone is associated with infertility in females of childbearing age by interfering with ovulation. Low thyroid level or levels in a pregnant woman may be increase the risk of miscarriage, premature delivery, anemia, postpartum hemorrhage, and preeclampsia or preeclampsia, which is a condition that causes a significant rise in expectant mother's blood pressure during the last 3 months of pregnancy. Insufficient thyroid hormone after delivery is also an underlying cause of postpartum depression, which may bring a feeling of inadequate and extreme tiredness. So in the next slide, neonatal development and newborn screening. So what is the relation between neonate development and thyroid hormone? Thyroid hormone is needed for the healthy development of the fetus, particularly the development of the nervous system in the newly conceived embryo. Lack of available thyroid hormone in the mother's blood supply can lead to severe physical and mental disabilities. For this reason, thyroid hormone testing has been recommended for women of childbearing age even prior to conception. So the thyroid hormone have a major role and play a major function during neonatal development. So the test of thyroid gland is very important during pregnancy, and so as to maintain normal conception and fetal development during pregnancy. And it also has been recommended that the woman should be tested for thyroid gland even prior to conception. Here in the next slide, the biochemistry of thyroid hormone. Here in this slide, I will show you how the T4 and T3 is also synthesized and released by the thyroid gland. Thyroid hormones are constructed by adding iodine residues to amino acid tyrosine. So the main metabolic here is between tyrosine and iodine. So in this showing on the right picture, which is a major component of the protein thyroglobulin, is the tyrosine. So the thyroglobulin is produced in the endoplasmic reticulum of the thyroid follicle cells and is secreted into the colloid follicles. Within the follicles, iodination, that means the addition of iodine to tyrosine residues, is also occurs. Initially, that means started the component or compound that is formed is monoiodotyrosine. MIT is abbreviation of monoiodotyrosine. This is the first component that formed from iodination or added of iodine to tyrosine in the colloid follicles, which contain thyroglobulin. which the monoiodotyrosine is a single iodine added to tyrosine through the action of enzyme thyroperoxidase TBO. So under the influence by this very important enzyme is also known as TBO, that abbreviation of thyroperoxidase enzyme have play a major role in iodination of tyrosine. A second iodine is added to MIT through the TBO enzyme, forming diiodo or diiodotyrosine, DIT. The structures of MIT and DIT are provided below to show where the iodine residual is attached, and this is come in the next slide here. When two diiodotyrosine molecule combine it through the action of TBO, the hormone tetraiodothyronine is formed, which is more commonly called thyroxine or T4. So when I said tyrosine, that means T4, and when I said T4, that I mean tyrosine. T4 is then catabolized to triiodothyronine or T3 by removing an iodine molecule through the action of the enzyme 5-deionase. So the 5-deionase enzyme have major function by removing iodine molecule from the T4 or from the thyroxine. The 5-deionase which require the cofactor selenium. So this enzyme also need a cofactor for maximum activation, which is also a selenium type of trace elements that needed or require for deionizase enzyme so as to reach maximum activity. Upon release of thyroid hormones into circulation, thyroglobin is largely conserved and recycled within the thyroid follicle. Here in this picture show us the monoiodothyroxine MIT, which is have only one iodine here molecule in tyrosine. In the down lecture here we have diiodotyrosine, which have two molecules of iodine here and here, and this is also helped by TBO enzyme. So in the next lecture here show us the principle or step of synthesis of monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine. So this the biochemistry or summary of iodination. Iodine plus tyrosine in the presence or influenced by the enzyme which is called TBO, thyroperoxidase enzyme, which also give or form it monoiodotyrosine MIT. The MIT plus iodine here in the presence of TBO, which is formed diiodotyrosine DIT. 2-DIT in the presence of TBO, which is formed thyroxine T4. That means 2-diiodotyrosine plus 2-diiodotyrosine, the total number is T4. The T4, which is also known as thyroxine. T4 in the presence of 5-deionase enzyme, in the presence of the selenium as the cofactors for this enzyme, is also reiodination or deionization to triiodothyroxine T3 plus free iodine. And this also this step is done in a peripheral tissue, not in the thyroid gland, such as liver, peripheral tissues in kidney or in liver. There is a second process, also known as deionization, remove of iodine from T4, which is also converted to T3 in peripheral tissue by deionization of thyroxine. So next slide This assembly of the T4 molecules as shown here in these pictures on the left. Thyroxine T4 is constructed by two diiodotyrosine. Diiodotyrosine plus diiodotyrosine is also constructed the T4, which through the action of enzyme thyroperoxidase TBO. T4 is the primary thyroid hormone assembled within the confines of thyroid gland. The majority of T4 is further proceed to triiodothyroxine, as I mentioned previously, by deionization in peripheral tissue, which is also the T4 converted to T3 by enzyme known as deionizase in the presence of cofactors selenium. Assembly of the T3 molecules. The hormone triiodothyroxine T3 is primarily derived from T4 through the removal of an iodine residue by a special enzyme called deionizase. This T4 converted to T3. This conversion process occur in the peripheral tissues such as liver, intestines, and circulation in different percentage. But the large percentage of the conversion of T4 to T3 is also occur in the liver, about 60%, and in intestinal about 20%, and in circulation about 20%. While T4 is more abundant than T3 in an approximate ratio of 9:1. That means the T4 is high concentration and production than T3, as a ratio of 9 for T4 and to 1 of T3. Is furthermore that the T3 is metabolically active rather than T4. That means T3 is metabolically active when compared to T4. T3 produced in circulation is influenced by adrenal hormones, namely cortisol, which may become elevated during period of high stress and forms an inactive configuration of T3 called reverse T3, in which one of the iodine residual is on mirrored position on the T3 molecule. That mean in stress or high stress there is a conversion of T3 to reverse T3, and this also done peripherally by the adrenal hormones, which namely cortisol influence that the conversion of T3 to reverse T3, and this become elevated during period of high stress. So this reverse T3 is also inactive, that made by remove one of iodine residual in a mirrored position of T3 molecules, such as in these pictures here. This is also T3 and converted, have a 3 iodine and converted to reverse T3. Total and free forms of T3 and T4. So more than 99% of T4 and T3 in circulation is bounded to the protein albumin and thyroxine binding globulin, which is called TBG. So mainly of T4 and T3 is protein bounded. Which kind of protein that can transport it the T4 and T3 in the circulation is mainly albumin and thyroxine binding globulin. Only a free or unbounded fraction of T4 and T3 are biologically active and are able to impart metabolic activity, so that when compare the T4 T3 total to the free fraction of T4 T3, which is more active and more metabolically active and have a major functions, is the free T4 and T3 when compared to total T3 and T4. So the biologically active is also the unbounded fraction of T4 and T3. It is for this reason that most current analytical assays for thyroid hormones are designed to measure the free forms and free T4 and free T3. This is additional investigation to thyroid gland. We have a thyroid profile which include TSH, total T4, total T3, and we have to additional designate hormone to ensure or to make a free T4 and T3 measurement, because it is have a major metabolically activity when compared to total T3. In this slide we have a practice question so as to refresh the previous mentioned slides. So in this practice question, what components are required to assemble thyroid hormone? Please select the single best answer, only one answer. Here we have A, iodine and thyroglobin, B, iodine and tyrosine, C, iodine, thyroglobin and tyrosine, iodine, in D, iodine, thyroglobin, thyroxine, and thyroperoxidase. So what is the component are required to assemble thyroid hormone? This is so easy question. I mentioned it previously, so I will give you the feedback of this question is here. Yes, right. We need iodine, thyroglobin, tyrosine, and thyroperoxidase so as to complete the formation of thyroid hormone. Yeah, we need the four iodine, thyroglobulin, tyrosine plus peroxidase enzyme. Okay, go on. The thyroid gland relationship with the endocrine system. So what is the relationship between thyroid gland and the other endocrine system? The thyroid gland is designed to be in a perfect harmony with pituitary gland and the endocrine system. After a meal or in anticipation of energy needs, the hypothalamus receives the someone's hormone, and the hypothalamus receives the hormone to initiate the production of the thyroid hormones. The hypothalamus provides a signal through the production of thyrotropin releasing hormones, as we mentioned it in the first lecture of endocrinology, hypothalamus and pituitary, and the hormones that produced by hypothalamus and pituitary. So as we also mentioned it, the anterior pituitary gland releasing hormone and the hypothalamus producing the stimulating hormone. So hypothalamus also release the releasing hormones so as to stimulate it anterior pituitary to produce and release stimulating hormone known as TSH. So the production of thyrotropin releasing hormone TRH to pituitary so as to produce thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. And this this feedback between hypothalamus and pituitary is also known as a short feedback. That means this is a positive feedback when the body needs thyroxine and T3 that also stimulate the hypothalamus to produce TRH, and the hypothalamus produce and release the TRH through the adenophases to the anterior pituitary so as to stimulate the anterior pituitary to start release TSH. So this stimulus or positive feedback between hypothalamus and pituitary is also known as a short feedback. When the TSH provide a positive stimulus for the thyroid gland to produce and release T4 into the circulation, the T3 is drive it and and part in action on the most metabolic process. So when the TSH reach the thyroid gland and the thyroid gland is stimulus to the TSH is started to begin to synthesis of the T3 and T4 and release out. Here the relation between the anterior pituitary and thyroid gland is also known as a long feedback. So between pituitary and hypothalamus, short feedback, and between the anterior pituitary to thyroid gland is also known as the long feedback. Here is also a stimulus because the body needs T4 and T3, and here is stimulating hormone. So when the excess T4 and T3 is in circulation, provide a negative feedback to the hypothalamus and pituitary so as to stop signaling that need for additional thyroid hormone production. So when there is excess production of T4 and T3 from thyroid gland, so as that circulated in the plasma, some of them combined or transported by binding to albumin and thyroglobulin, and some of them are released freely. When the body reaches the normal reach or normal concentration, the negative feedback is also done by the free T4 and T3 to hypothalamus so as to suppress hypothalamus to produce TRH so as to suppress anterior pituitary to stop production of TSH and so as to stop stimulus to thyroid gland to production of T4 and T3. This is also known as the negative feedback. And this negative feedback between hypothalamus and pituitary is also known as the short feedback, negative feedback, and between anterior pituitary and thyroid is also known as the long negative feedback. This is a classic negative feedback loop, and when in cyanochromin, the result in a very narrow and tightly regulated concentration of available free T4 and free T3 in circulation. Here in this picture, here is a diagram of a negative and positive feedback. There is a hypothalamus which connect to pituitary gland. Here is anterior and posterior pituitary gland. The hypothalamus connect to anterior pituitary gland by the adenophysis connection, which has specialized capillary or blood vessels, so as to transport TRH from hypothalamus to anterior pituitary, so that TRH stimulated the anterior pituitary to produce TSH, and the TSH is also released in circulation. The relation between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is also known as a short feedback. When the TSH is released from the anterior pituitary so as to stimulate the thyroid gland so as to start synthesis and production of T4 and T3. When there is starting and release of T4 and T3, the T4 and T3 have a major function as I mentioned it previously. So when the circulation reach of T4 and T3, this also come back to the hypothalamus. When is this also mean as a negative feedback so as to inhibit production of TRH so as to inhibit stimuli to pituitary to suppress release of TSH. This is also known as a negative feedback, and between thyroid and hypothalamus is also known as a long feedback, and between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is also known as a short feedback. So in next slide, the pituitary gland and regulation of thyroid function. The graphic demonstrate here in the left that demonstrate the general hypothalamic pituitary scheme, depicting the input of the central nervous system CNS to initiate the hypothalamus to stimulate the pituitary, so as the pituitary then produce the trophic hormone, which that thyroid stimulating hormone. The TSH acts upon the thyroid as endocrine gland to produce and secrete T4 and T3. Take a note in this scheme. The feedback of secretory hormones to the pituitary and hypothalamus is either positive or negative based on circulating concentration of T4 and T3. So the control of negative positive feedback is also controlled by the production of hormone from the thyroid gland or end organ produce hormone. So thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. Here we're talking some briefly about the thyroid hormone TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone TSH is also called thyrotropin. Is a glycoprotein produced exclusively by anterior pituitary gland, as previously mentioned in the first lecture of endocrine. TSH is the only normally occurring hormone that directly stimulates the thyroid hormone or thyroid gland to produce the thyroid hormones. See in this picture is the relation between the thyroid TSH and hypothalamus, which produce the thyroid hormone. So go on, the hypothalamus and regulating of thyroid function, the relation between hypothalamus and thyroid function. The hypothalamus is an alongside region of a brain that links the nervous system to the endocrine system. The hypothalamus produces and secretes neurohormones or releasing hormones that stimulate or inhibit the secretion of the pituitary hormones. Related to the thyroid function, the hypothalamus produces thyrotropin releasing hormone TRH, which stimulates to release of TSH as well as the hormone prolactin from the pituitary. Here there is also another function of TSH mentioned here. The TSH also stimulated the production of the thyroid hormone plus production of prolactin hormone. Here in this picture show out the relation between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary as in this picture is clearly illustrate the relation between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. The hypothalamus and regulating of thyroid hormone, we mention it in this picture. Okay, go on. Thyrotropin releasing hormone TRH is also known as thyrotropin releasing actor. Is secreted by anterior region of the hypothalamus along with a number of identified and well-characterized releasing hormones. TRH infusion has been used in clinical testing to determine if the pituitary gland is responsive to the stimulus in production thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. As I mentioned previously in the lectures of method of hormones assay, I mentioned that the laboratory test of the hormone or hormone measurement in laboratory, we have two types of tests. One is called the basal level test, when to start collect blood during the day or during any time of day. Some of hormone not affected by diurnal rhythms, so can be estimated and measured during the day. This is also known as the basal level test. And another test in laboratory done, which is also known as dynamic test, and this dynamic test is also done under stimulate or suppress by giving or injecting substance so as to suppress or stimulate another gland to produce hormone, which help the endocrinologist to find which the cause of hypo or hyper secretion of gland. In this test also we have to inject or to make some activity before collecting to blood sample, and this also known as the dynamic test. while the lack of production of TRH may be result in deficiency of TSH. TRH is not routinely measured in clinical laboratory to assess thyroid gland, but done in highly specialized laboratory done by the endocrinologist, so as to assess which the defect of this hormone come from under a dynamic test. So go on. In this slide, there is the parathyroid gland in relation to the thyroid. As I mentioned previously, the parathyroid gland is a part of thyroid gland, as there is a parathyroid gland, as the prefix para impulse lie at the side of the thyroid gland. Actually, one of transfers of posterior side of the thyroid. They impart no effect on thyroid function, but because of their anatomic approximately or approximately may be damaged by thyroid treatment. So sometimes when we make a thyroid surgical or thyroid removal, this is also can affect the parathyroid and production of calcitonin by remove of thyroid gland. Why? Because the thyroid gland contain the parathyroid glands or follicles producing calcitonin. So humans usually have 4 parathyroid glands that are responsible for regulating the calcium level in circulation, as I mentioned. If the thyroid gland needs to be surgical removed due to cancers growth or is treated with radiation to treat cancer, occasionally the parathyroid gland are damaged or even removed as well as by chance. So in these pictures here show us the position of thyroid gland like butterfly connected by schemas. There is parafollicles here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 in left and 2 in right. There is 4 parafollicle cells producing parathyroid hormone, which is called calcitonin. By this here the lecture is finished, and this some references maybe help you to recall some of this lecture information, or for needed more information about the thyroid gland. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.